Hi, and welcome everyone to the final day of Data for Development EU-Africa Conference. Today's keyword is transformation, as we started our conference with the launch of both the conference and the hackathon. We then went on to the foundation that we will build our journey on, then some development, and today is all about transformation. In fact, our hackathon participants just submitted 1 hour ago their videos of the products they have been working on to transform Africa. And today's panel is big data, which is probably the most relevant panel for this topic of data for development. And I'm joined by both Michael Opondo, founder and CEO of AI Made in Africa, and Sam Okot, co-founder and CEO of the Misfit. And probably I'll start with you, Michael, if you'd like to introduce yourself, share bit about your background and your story with big data.
My name is Michael Opondo. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. So my professional background is actually in law. I studied law at Kenyatta University, which is based here in Nairobi. But then I went into international development, where I worked for around 6 years. And in international development, I was mostly interested in analytics, analyzing the data on how things are happening in the international development sector. I was working in the peace and security sector, worked with a few agencies, the UN, the US State Department. I also managed to work with the Public Safety Canada. And that is where my deep interest with data came about, because I interacted with a lot of people who are not only looking at how things are happening on the ground, but how data is being analyzed on, the same things. So when I came back to Nairobi, I went, head first into data science, and then machine learning, and then I got into software development. So that's how I transitioned into the tech world. I transitioned in 2018. That's when I started my transitioning journey. I already had a firm called Ginkano and Associates, which we do data analytics services and web development services. And it is in the process of that we founded AI Made in Africa to connect African startups to African tech talents. So that's what we are currently doing. We are currently building that, trying to see how the next year is going to look like. Yeah.
Fantastic. Very nice to meet you, Michael. I remember while talking to you as well, you mentioned that you have a legal background. So maybe you can shed some more light on that and why you started, for instance, your data-driven knowledge media company.
Yes, thank you very much. It's good to be here and to hear from my brother, Opondo, who is my senior to me in the legal field. So I studied law from Makerere University, which I concluded earlier this year, and it's really great to be here right now. While at university, I was really interested in leadership. I worked with UN Millennium Fellowship as a campus director. I was heading a national organization called World Leaders of Today. It's actually based in Kenya, the headquarters, at around 18 years old. And I've done some international programs as well with Turkish government in Turkey, the Turkish Ministry of Sport, where we're doing a lot of comparative studies. Recently, I've been mostly involved in the mineral development sector of Africa, and it was also really where I got a lot of passion for data, because in the minerals world, the numbers are crazy, the profits are crazy, but then there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of poverty living right next to ultimate wealth, and I really got interested to know why it is. And so through that, I've actually managed to build good connections. I organized the Madini Convention, which is Africa's foremost conventional minerals development that features all the major leaders and also some very good data banks globally, especially companies like Panelists that have a key interest in ESG considerations. And so that has really hyped up my interest. Right now, the Economic Misfit is transitioning just from a knowledge magazine into more of a data-driven platform, a data analytics platform, a data visualization platform. And we're really excited to see what we are coming up with, I believe, early in 2022. And that is mostly my story. I'm in data because I got bored by a lot of the sensationalism that goes on all over media and really shallow type of clickbait information. And I think maybe we need something richer to build the economic.
Fantastic. So it seems that you have like quite a diverse background, and you had also an international exposure. And I think maybe Michael, since both of you transitioned, you could share with us how was the transition? Did you find any difficulties moving from a non-tech background to a technical background? Actually, both of you, any one of you can take it.
On my side, I wouldn't say the transition was tough, but you know the story could be different for somebody else. The reason for that is that, like I said, in my 6 years working in international development, I was involved with data, quantitative and qualitative data. I was always interested, you know, working with the kind of agencies. I was working with the UN, the US State Department, the British High Commission. They're always interested in the results. They want to see the numbers. And that means you always have to look at the numbers. You always have to try and understand what these numbers mean for the future. So for the whole time I was in international development, I was involved with data, like on a very regular basis. I remember even before I made a full transition to tech, I already had knowledge of using data analytics tools like Tableau and Power BI. Those were, at that time, those were very basic for me. I had to know how to use them to do what I needed to do. So me transitioning now from data analytics at that time to now studying, programming, Python, whatever. I think the only challenge was now the programming languages, but not the concepts. The concepts were some things that I was already exposed to. But of course, the story could be different for somebody else. For me, I wouldn't say it was that tough.
How about you, Sam? Thanks for sharing that. Sam? Okay. I can't really hear him, so I'll probably just ask you actually. Mike, since when we were discussing, you talked about there is a massive shortage of there is a massive shortage of talent in the industry. So maybe you can mention what are the roadblockers to the adoption of big data in the industry and what you are doing to solve those.
Okay, so talking about roadblockers of big data, let me speak for my perspective on the African continent or region, if you may. We have two main barriers for adoption. We have the technical, and we also have the non-technical. So for the technical, we'll be looking at the skills, the skills needed to work in big data or to handle big data. The equipment, the type of equipment that will be needed, like for big data for us to even speak of big data, we have to speak of IoT, like Internet of Things, because it's through IoT that we can have data that has, the four components of big data, which is variety, volume, veracity, and velocity. So if we don't have the equipment for IoT, in my perspective, that is, then big data won't even be possible. And we have so many applications of IoT in Africa. We have hospitals, we have schools, we have supermarkets, we have malls, but you'll find that most of them, they're not even aware of the potential that they could have, in big data. And then when we're looking at non-technical barriers, we're looking at the lack of data culture in Africa, the lack of data awareness. Like I've mentioned, we have malls and hospitals who are not very conversant with the potential of the data that they collect. So those are the non-technical ones. So for me, I feel for Africa, those are the main ones. We have the technical, the lack of technical skills, the lack of equipment, and then the non-technical, you can look at the lack of data cultures and data awareness. Yeah.
Fantastic. And in a way, it's a bit ironic that you are referring to the infrastructure. And sadly, we just had some connectivity issues, so we lost Sam to that. But I hope he joins us back. I'm also hearing that Naomi might join us. So,
can you get me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us well?
Yeah, I can hear you. I heard you well.
Fantastic. So we were just talking about what kind of roadblockers are faced by big data in trying to be adopted in our beloved continent. So if you have any comments on that, that would be great.
Yeah, so I had Opondo well, and I will just buttress a little bit more on the non-technical issues, especially around policy in Africa, because it's really hard to move without the framework of policy. And just this morning, I was running through the Inception report that was talking about, how Africa is catching up in terms of policy, but they noted that there's a lack. In terms of lack of data culture at the government level, it's more alluded to the fact that usually there are certain issues that are considered to be more priority. For example, insecurity, hunger, and poverty. And the things that kind of look to be very immediate to our government, and so they don't see the relevance of data loads. I was actually so surprised that because in the region of East Africa, I think Uganda and Kenya have done quite well with data loads. I was surprised that a third of African countries don't have any form of legislation, not the real form of legislation. And so even where there's legislation, the scope is really limited. For example, we see in Nigeria, which has a very big portion of Africa's internet and mobile cellular users, they still don't have regulations to guide actually e-commerce transactions, which is actually very interesting for a country like Nigeria. So in terms of technical spaces and in terms of the non-technical, I think policy issues affect a lot how we grow into data. We still have restrictions in terms of information data flow all over the continent. It's really important because we are creating stringent laws on data flow, and yet we can't implement. We don't have the infrastructure to implement anything anyway, and the data is flowing from the countries that are benefiting also anyway. So I saw a statistic from DHL, which has very good flow. Indexes on flow of trade, and they say only 5 African countries and the top 100 countries in the world in terms of flow of data, which is really important for trade as well. So some of these issues, and then around policy, I just wanted to add a bit to Opondo, who actually segmented them very well into the technical and non-technical. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing about the legal framework, because that could be also something we would explore further in this panel. But just meanwhile, I would like you, Sam, to maybe turn off your camera so we can hear you clearly. And if you can use earphones, that would be great, just so that we don't lose you while you are speaking. And I see that Naomi has joined us. Can you hear me, Naomi?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Should I also turn off my camera?
No, we hear you fine. No need for that for now. So maybe you could just introduce yourself. And I know that you are the chapter director for the South African, like the international organization, Women in Big Data. So in the
Yes.
South African chapter. So maybe you can also share with us why you chose to start that chapter and lead it.
So I started the South African chapter for Women in Big Data in November 2018. It was actually myself and 5 other ladies. So we co-founded this chapter because we felt it was important for us to create a community where women can come and learn from each other. Particularly those women who are working in industry right now and would like to pivot their careers into technology-focused type roles or data-centered roles, like data analysts, data scientists, and AI researchers. So we founded this community so that we can create a learning community where we are all have access to learning platforms through our strategic global partnerships. We've just signed the Global AI Hub as one of our strategic partners for the South African chapter, where they offer virtual training and courses for women in our community. So we felt very important that it was very important for us to have this community where we could capacity build and help women prepare for their future careers.
Fantastic. And you actually joined us just as we were discussing about the shortage of talent in the industry and what are some of the roadblockers. So maybe you can shed some light, especially from a women perspective.
I mean, we all know that industry right now is, getting overhauled and transformed in terms of, the type of leaders that we have, the gender diversity and parity that we still need to work on as industry wide. So the technology space is nothing different. The tech space or the tech industry also has those same elements where women are not growing into leadership roles within tech companies. And this is a factor of many things. One of those being their ability to actually get into those leadership roles via their competencies, right? So we are trying to build the competencies in terms of the technical competencies, but also the ability to hold business meetings, soft skills, providing them with also, workshops that help build their confidence when they are in the boardroom, things to look out for that we might not, highlight as important, but from a soft skills perspective, actually adds value to the type of leader a person then ends up kind of like being. So for us, it's really important to not just focus on the technical capabilities, but also on the softer skills, how to lead empathetically, how to lead effectively, and obviously adding value to the business that you are a part of.
Fantastic. And I would like to zoom out just a little bit. And since it's an EU-Africa conference, I would like you to draw some comparisons from your experience between the two continents, maybe even in terms of inclusion of women in big data. And I would like you also, Mike, to add to this answer if possible from your side.
Okay, so first of all, about inclusion of women in Africa, I'm not very, I will be very, very much knowledgeable about, the specifics of that. But what I know currently, like in Africa, women only make around, I think it's 26% of, the profession. And they're also more likely than men to quit their higher tech positions. Those are just some of the pointers that I have based on our research in AI Made in Africa, looking at the disparity in the two genders, how they're contributing to the whole data industry. Apart from that, I also know that less women are actually graduating into the STEM careers. That is a drop from the previous years, which is surprising because we assume right now the balance is supposed to be happening, but unfortunately, less and less women are graduating into the STEM careers. In terms of comparisons between Africa and the EU, I think the main difference I would mention is that in Africa, there's less strategic partners to work with for big data initiatives, and there's also generally African states that are weakly engaged in the the big data conversations. Yes, those are the main contributions I would have on those two.
Fantastic. Naomi, anything you would like to add to this, or Sam?
Yes,
Yeah,
so we actually, as Women in Big Data global community, we did a study just based on our community members, all 17,000 around the globe. And what we found and this is published on our website, so you can go and read in depth about it. What we did find is that 26% of women globally make up the data professionals or data science roles. And of those, between 15 and 22% are actually in private companies, private technology companies. So you can see that it's a small margin of women that are actually in industry working in these roles and can actually hold these positions. We also found that, just similar to what Mike was saying, that 51% actually abandon their tech training altogether. So obviously there are other perceptions with regards to working in tech, particularly the more technical roles like the software engineering spaces, but we need to ask ourselves those important questions of how do we best support women to not only train as data professionals, but also go forward and lead in industry, right? What are those key milestones or those key phases of life that actually we start to see women drop off from these trainings? Like I said, with Women in Big Data, we really target working women who are currently in industry. We offer self-learning online courses that you can do at your own time, but also we don't take for granted that women, particularly those in marriages, they tend to take care of the childcare responsibilities more than their spouses. So we also need to be mindful of the fact that there are a significant number of women around the world that are single parent households. So these things are the ones that we can identify, or these factors are the ones that we can identify that actually impact our ability to retain women in business so that they can go on and lead in these professional disciplines.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. How about you, Sam?
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to add that when we speak about European Union, when we speak about Africa, there's a big difference in the way these two blocks are moving. We note that European Union, in the way they facilitate conversations around trust, flow of data, mobilizing investments and key infrastructure regulation, it's done as Europe, and it's tested along what they call European values. And so, we have the European strategy for data, which we are following right now. And what this brings is one whole block that increases the market, increases the negotiating power, increases, and so there's this unity that we see in the European Union that actually hasn't yet come here very well. We see a lot of Africa in terms of data is really is not as united as we would like it to be. We see a lot of uniformity just because of different legal frameworks, and not just that, but actually a lot of countries not having frameworks at all. And so the closest we are moving to is the AFCFTA, which I believe we'll discuss later. But the closest they have to, bringing together Africa on something around that is the e-commerce protocol, which I believe will come out next year. And this just shows a big difference between, how Europe, EU is moving as a bloc as regards issues concerning data, and then how Africa still has a lot of work to do in this regard. Thank you.
Fantastic. So like indeed, like EU is like moving as one block, and we tend to hear a lot about these EU-wide initiatives. You mentioned the legal framework, so we all are familiar with the GDPR. Even the entire world had to adapt to it. Can we ever hear about a Pan-African big data initiative?
Yes, thank you very much. So there is hope with the AFC. There is hope with the AFC. AFCFTA, the initiative that was initiated by African Union this year, that is driving us towards the Agenda 2063. So the goal is to make Africa a global player, just like any other continent. I believe there's a lot of hope with this. I don't think we should move away from the AFCFTA. All the 54 countries have signed this, so it's binding to the countries, and therefore it's a big opportunity. The AFCFTA, or I like to call it ACFA, you'll bear with me, is anchored on 5 major instruments. That's the rules of origin, the online negotiating forums, bringing Africans to negotiate all the time, monitoring and elimination of non-tariff barriers. We look at digital payment systems, African trade observatories, and all these need data, a lot of data, to be able to facilitate, business finance, skilled personnel, suppliers, potential customers, product delivery partners, and all these aspects of trade that we have to bring together into Africa. And so the ACFA has the role to harmonize data governance in Africa, because it's actually binding on the countries, and so it has this progressive role to bring together. And I think we have to lobby behind ACFA, all of us, to see how it can shine in its dual role as a beneficiary and enabler of harmonized data governance in Africa. I think this is one big tool. We shouldn't look over it. We took time to create it, and we should, fight to bring this harmonized data governance framework in Africa through the ACFA that we already have here. So we want ACFA to do a few things. For example, defining the scope and coverage and regional stance. Africa as a region of data governance. We need to know the rules on the interoperability of cross-border data flows. That's very important. The minimum standards for ethical use of data, coordination on cybercrime. So how do countries in Africa coordinate together when there are issues around cyber crimes that may come up? Coordinated approach on taxing borderless transactions, online consumer protection laws, cross-border payments, principles on data protection, how can open government data be accessed, digital identities, and then, of course, very importantly, we need to know the data localization exceptions, because while we are Africa, we have different countries, and different countries may have particular interests, especially where there's conflict and certain unique issues in having exceptions towards the free flow of data. So I think ACFA is a very big hope for us as Africa, and it's one of the things that, if well leveraged, we can stand behind it and push it to see how we can, harmonize Africa's data governance forum and data governance to at least match what we see in Europe, because it helps to move much faster when everyone is in sync. But before we harmonize, we need to investigate a lot of other issues concerning the data world. For example, what is the level of citizen awareness right now in Africa? If we say we want Africa to be, one block like Europe, what's the citizen level of, we have to look at what is the technical gap in the legislators. I have a friend of mine who came back from Canada, and he became a legislator in Uganda, and he was trying to talk to fellow lawmakers about, the issues around data, and nobody was aligning with him. So who are our policy makers and regulators, and what are the skill gaps that they have, and how can we fill some of these things? How much funding is there for data protection authorities in Africa? Is it sufficient? Can they work together as different countries, but as African data protection authorities, And then what are some of the challenges that hinder regional harmonized data framework? This is very important because parts of Africa are very polarized in terms of relations, and we need to know what are some of these practical issues, be alive to it. And one of the people believe data can solve a lot of the problems in Africa, but I also think trading can solve a lot of the problems in Africa. So I really think we should rally behind the Africa preferential trade area and see how we can, harmonize our data governance as a block for better prosperity of Africa. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this very comprehensive answer. And indeed, I'm actually quite proud of the work that's being done with the AFC-FTA. For our audience members that are not familiar with the acronym, that means the African Continental Free Trade Area. And of course, as you can see, there is some branding to be done because it's very hard to pronounce. And you also referred to the cyber attacks, how we can defend against them. And luckily, we'll have later on today a cybersecurity panel, so we could definitely discuss that further. And I would like to hear from the other panelists if they have any additions to this. Perfect.
Okay, I was gonna wait for Mike to say something, but I'll say something. I think for me, what's critical, it's really also be mindful of, who's doing the data collection and who's actually building that future for Africa. We need to stop as the African youth to look to the world to come and solve our problems. I think it's our time now to take the reins and actually try and influence where we can in our own spaces. It does become intimidating when you start to think about the whole macroeconomic impact and all of the other factors that we have to deal with from a skills perspective, the brain drain, especially in South Africa, where the experienced professionals are now leaving the country to go to other parts of the world and build there. But I think it's very important to work hand in hand with the policymakers and also being mindful who those people are, right? I think we as youth also shouldn't shy away from certain professionals and want to just do the tech and sexy, type of roles. We need to be mindful that all of these, bodies of in the economy actually help stimulate what we're trying to actually achieve as an African continent. The regulatory space is very important, but it's also important to also be future focused and future orientated as policymakers and not hinder the people that actually want to innovate and solve African problems. But we also need the people that are doing the problem solving to be from African countries, because they understand the types of communities that they come from. They understand how people behave in these communities and how they actually interconnect, right? So it's important for all of us to really hold hands and stop looking to the world to help solve our problems, I think.
Fantastic. So let's just go back a bit and assume I have no background in tech or big data. Why or why not big data? I know it's a loaded question. I would like to hear all your opinions on it. So since we have you, Naomi, you could just continue on that one.
Big data is really the cornerstone of how humans are going to be making decisions in the future. And this is really about how, if you look from a health perspective, let's use that as an example, right? Because the pandemic has shown that we can actually track the movement of this virus via the data that we've collected, right? It also helps us, communicate to communities how they should be, taking care of themselves in terms of, the amount of people that are infected in their area. Just yesterday, I was getting an SMS from my medical aid, which is my health insurance, letting me know that, people in my area have tested positive, therefore I should be away. They've collected data on this and it's informed by that, right? So that's very important to help us not only survive as a human race, but also to manage our interactions with each other, and also our ability to then influence how we spend money. I mean, from an economic point of view, again, we need efficient decision making that can actually is not just looking at from an emotive point of view, but that is based on logic and rationality, where we can actually also understand the various factors that influence the way things are today so that we can problem solve effectively. So big data is very important for us to try and understand, but also to dig deeper into the philosophical impact of some of the decisions that have gotten us to this point, right? And really interrogate those so that we can, again, problem solve more effectively and in an inclusive manner.
Mike, I know that the unemployment is quite dear to your heart, so maybe you could answer the same question from that perspective.
So in my whole 6 years in international development, one of the main things that you'll see in almost every initiative that is being done by an NGO in Africa is unemployment is the cause for this. Unemployment is the cause for insecurity, is the cause of people joining extremist groups, is the cause of so many things. So myself joining sorry, just a moment. Sorry, I live close to the airport, so sometimes the planes yeah, so sometimes you find that organizations are just commercializing unemployment in Africa. An organization, they know very well that if they mention unemployment, they're going to get some sort of support. And I'm speaking this from my experience and not just from things I've heard or in reports. So my joining in the tech industry, I wanted to find logical and practical and also sustainable ways to handle this unemployment issue. And we find that Africa is the youngest continent. The population is the young population is growing exponentially, and these population are they're people who can actually learn, and they can be directed into the tech world. It's not a difficult industry as it's perceived to be. When you mention big data or you mention machine learning or data science, usually you just lock somebody out. But I transitioned from the legal field into the tech world, and it wasn't that difficult. Maybe that's just for me, but there's always a role somebody can play in tech, because if you can't play the technical roles in tech, you can always give data context, because we can't just apply data and statistics in a vacuum. We have to give them context. So if you can't do the technical work, you can always give data context. So I feel there's a lot of potential for solving the unemployment issue in the tech industry and largely in the data industry. And the other thing that also Naomi has mentioned is about the brain drain issue. At AI Made in Africa, we are connecting African tech talents to African startups. And the reason for that is African tech talents, the best of the best, are usually looking for big tech companies that are outside the continent. They might not leave the continent. They might be in the continent, but they're working remotely. Right now, they're working remotely with these big tech companies. They're not looking to work with African startups. But the African startups is growing. We just hit 4 billion in funding this year, and we are yet to close the year. So we're waiting to see when we release the report next year, how much was funded in Africa. And if the tech space is booming, the startup space is booming, and we also have a growing young population, why can't this young population work with African startups? Why are they, preferring to work with big tech companies? I mean, it's these startups that are solving African problems. So we can solve African problems using African talent, and this is the way for us. We are trying to, to redirect the African talent to solve African, problems. Yeah. So for me, there's a huge potential for solving the unemployment issue, even if not completely, but to a very big extent, using in the data and big data and the tech industry at large. Yeah.
Thank you. Sam, this one is for you. So Naomi earlier mentioned why big data from a decision-making perspective. Mike just add an example of an area where it could be quite useful and it could advance the continent. Do you have any other examples for us? Why big data or why not as well? Might have an interesting view on that.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, personally, I have a very big passion for welfare issues on the African continent. I believe welfare is unnecessarily ignored in the continent. I don't think, I think this year or last year, the global GDP hit $100 trillion. And I was seeing in Glasgow at the environmental conference, the financial companies throwing figures like $130 trillion towards sustainable technology and all these sorts of amounts of money that we already hear in the world. And yet we can't seem to find something little to solve Africa's welfare issues, especially around things like health, education, access to water. And I think, so we have to ask ourselves, who is ignoring this problem? I feel like the money is there, but someone is ignoring something, or maybe someone lacks the data. And so luckily, we live in a very teal generation, a generation really concerned about non-financial considerations. We feel ESG coming out as the mainstream consideration right now for companies. And this has, for me, heightened my interest in data and how it can solve some of the welfare issues. I come from the minerals world, I say it, and we have gold mines, for example, in Uganda, where we have people living in extreme poverty right next to the gold mine. And, these are owned by millionaires from Uganda and abroad as well. But it's the poorest, if not the poorest area in Uganda. And not neutrally poor, because they also face a lot of health risks. And so we got in touch through Minerals African Development Institution, where I advised with another company called Sustainability, and we said, okay, can we at least find out what it takes to live a decent life as a bigger, the least ranking digger of gold in Uganda. And so there's a project going on in central and western Uganda, where you find out what does it take to educate a child in this place, what does it take to have healthcare, what does it take to have access to clean water, how will this, so there's that gathering of information. And then this has nothing to do with our government yet, but we can see that because of the heightened interest in ESG considerations, companies from abroad can actually buy this data. So there are ways of funding data for welfare issues that weren't there before. There's more unity in the idea that we all must have a better world with economic equity, at least for the different players at their different levels. There must be a minimum for everyone. And so welfare really motivates me. And right now at the Economic Misfit, we are working with a German company called Startup to bring bring about some data technology for helping our parliament and different stakeholders. The Uganda Investment Authority, we want to provide them with some of this information so that when investors come, they have access to information and some of the considerations. Even if it's not for the exact area they're investing in, they know the consideration to take while setting up their.
Sam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so we are actually starting to run out of time. So probably just as a closing, and I know you mentioned welfare, and we do have a number of actually participants and teams working on the welfare side of things, and some disruptive ideas that would be appearing in the final. What are your maybe encouragement words to these teams participating in the hackathon? I'll start with you, Sam, then we'll close with the others.
Okay, thank you. My advice to you is just keep going with with what you're doing. I advise you to be very innovative with how you approach your funding, especially as an African startup. As fellow startup owner, I know that we receive a lot of usually we receive a lot of catalyzer programs and advice and everything, but the money doesn't usually come with the same energy as advice for African startups. But just open your chest wide, be confident, try to contact. Like I said, it's not just our government to fund us, they're actually people genuinely interested. You can even trade welfare data to companies. There are a lot of companies coming to Africa to do mining, to do all these major projects. And we just have to find a way of working together and creating a network where we can create value for this data. So thank you very much. Keep going with welfare, and please be open to alternative business strategies that will be able to fund some of this work, because most people who do welfare end up giving up, but there's actually a lot of financial compensation for this work if we optimize the sources of income. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So those of you working on welfare specifically, don't lose hope. There are many ways to get funding, and just keep pushing. From you, Naomi, any final words of encouragement to our participants?
I'd like to say to the people participating that thank you for giving your time to problem solve for whatever you're trying to solve for. It is important to this continent. It is important that we all come together and try to find ways of improving our communities and the societies we come from. Stay curious, stay asking the important questions, but also be mindful of how the solutions that you're proposing is going to impact the communities that we come from, right? Don't be scared to also look at other disciplines, people from other disciplines that are not necessarily in tech, because they can also add a lot of value to the solution that you are bringing. And to the women who are participating in this hackathon or this conference, again, thank you for making time to give your time and be here with us. Your presence here is important and it is valuable, even if we don't call it out sometimes, but please continue to participate in these events, in these community building, capacity building initiatives, because 50 years from now, our children are going to be looking at us, with the eyes of, what did we do to help solve the problems of this continent? Thank you.
Fantastic. So be the future role models, and also look at the community when solving the problems, and include and think about diversity, not only from a gender perspective, but also from a field perspective. How about you, Mike? Any final words from you?
From my side, I think the main thing I'll say is let's, as African youths, we are basically going to not just shape the African tech industry, but potentially the global one, because we are the youngest continent, and the population is just growing. It's not like we are set to be taken over by any other continent. So I would urge, as African youths, let's stay curious about African problems and African solutions. Only we understand the things that are happening in Africa more than anybody else. And let's also pursue strategic partnerships with other continents, other regions, and all that. It's also very important to learn from what other continents have done and what we can replicate from them. Case in example is like the GDPR policy that were implemented in the EU. Like, what are we doing in Africa to protect the data, the African data? Because data is the new oil, so we need to learn to know how to protect it. You can literally destroy somebody's life today just using the data you have on that person. So let's be curious about African problems. Let's be curious about African solutions, and most importantly, let's pursue strategic partnership with other continents. Thank you.
Fantastic. So yeah, you did actually sum it up at the end by yourself. So thank you so much for our panelists. This has been quite an interesting discussion. You did indeed make a case for big data. I know we are already past that stage of making cases for this technology. Otherwise, we need to catch up on a lot of things. But thank you so much. And I think that's it from my side. To our audience, enjoy your the rest of the conference. We still have some panels coming up. We still have some rewards and awards for our hackathon participants. So stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Dear Boyer.